All right. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Success Spotlight. My name, of course, is Nolan Duda. I'm the Client Experience Manager for IdealTraits. And today we have our 11th edition, or our December edition of course, Success Spotlight. So today we have guests Suzanne Dwyer. Suzanne has 25 plus years of experience working in the financial industry with companies like Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, and Merrill Lynch. But in November of 2021, Suzanne took a leap and decided to purchase an Allstate agency in Pennsylvania, and to this point has 8 staff completely working virtually and has doubled the book size since taking over the business in November of 2021, as I mentioned. But throughout Suzanne's career, she has extensive experience with hiring, firing, and managing professional individuals, and some of her hobbies are traveling, fitness, music, cooking, good food, spending time with loved ones, and she made sure that I mentioned that she's an advocate for wine and tequila both. But Suzanne, you mentioned that in your bio that you embody the work hard, play hard mentality. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that as we talk about how you've been able to hire your staff and what you do to obviously keep them engaged with your agency. But I really appreciate you taking time out of what I know is your incredibly busy schedule. So Suzanne, welcome to Success Spotlight, and I appreciate you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting. I literally, as you started the broadcast, it says I consent. I'm like, I could back out right now, right? Just kidding.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful that you didn't, because that would have been a very awkward intro. You would have just gone by. But no, I appreciate you, of course, for joining. And usually how we kick things off is just a little bit of an introduction to your story. I know I mentioned it a little bit with you purchasing the agency there in 2021, but of course, hearing it from you, what made you make that decision? We've talked about it a little bit, but I'm sure all here today would love to hear it directly from you.
Thank you, Nolan, and certainly thank you for asking me to join you today. I'm humbled to actually be here speaking to agents who I'm sure have a ton more experience than the 5 minutes that I've spent in this business.
Sure.
But as you said, I spent over 25 years in corporate America, managing large teams of financial advisors for Fortune 100 companies. And it was a great career. And I shared with you how gratifying it was over the years that I was in it. There were some catalysts in my life right before COVID that caused me to think about doing something differently. And some of it was personal. I had some issues with my son had some health issues. I was on this treadmill where I was working 12 plus hour days, not complaining. It was what it was, and I enjoyed it until I didn't. And I looked around me and realized the happiest people in my life were people that worked for themselves. They were entrepreneurs. They owned businesses. And I thought, at the time I was in my mid 50s, I guess I'm 60 now, just shared my age with everyone. And I didn't want to retire. I have way too much energy and wanted to be relevant. I thought, okay, I'm gonna start a business. I'm gonna buy a business. I'm gonna buy a franchise. And I looked at a number of things. And I have a friend who bought an agency 5 years before I was making this journey, and she convinced me to look into the property casualty business. And I looked at all the franchises and landed on Allstate because I like the structure of agency ownership. I love the brand. And spoke to a number of agency owners as I slow walked this decision. It took me a little while. And I, took the leap and bought an Allstate agency. I will tell you, my first 6 months, am I allowed to curse? It was a shit show. It wasn't very pretty. I'd come in, from a business that I knew like the back of my hand into something that I virtually had no experience in.
Sure.
Certainly knew how to manage people and do all of that, but it's a different world. So my first 6 months weren't pretty, but sitting here as an elite agent, made Pinnacle elite, doubled the size of the book, persevering and standing on the shoulders of a lot of people who gave me a lot of their time to help, pull me along in this learning curve.
Absolutely. Yeah. And accomplishing those things, as I've told you a couple times already, in 3 years in that short time is quite the accomplishment. So again, congratulations to you, as I've said. And you mentioned, it was a little bit of a rocky road when you were first starting, right? And as you know, right, in your time within corporate America, staffing and bringing on good people is imperative to the success of an institution and a business, right? So when you took over that agency, how did you determine when it was time or to bring on salespeople, to bring on service people? How did you go about that process when you had first started?
Yeah, people are everything in business. They are everything. And so when I bought the agency, there were a couple folks that were working with that agent that I brought along with me. My recruiting process started before I even opened my doors because I added some folks. I had recruited a different way. When I was recruiting for financial advisors, I was at Merrill Lynch calling an advisor at a firm down the street, trying to convince them to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, or a drink with me, right? These weren't people looking for a job. So I had to shift how I recruited because it's a different caliber of individual that you're recruiting, but
Yep.
hiring the right folks is critical. And so, and this was the summer of 2021. This is COVID where everybody was home and there wasn't a big candidate pool. It was really, really challenging. And so I hired who I could and not necessarily the people that I would hire today. I've certainly learned a lot in the 3 years, but the staff is key. And so it's about hiring the right people and then giving them the structure to succeed with, training, coaching, and accountability. The original folks that came with the agency are no longer here. None of that was acrimonious, but I had a strategy and a plan. And if you couldn't get on board with the plan, then this was not the right place for you.
Sure.
And so for me, that recruiting process started before I even opened my doors.
Yeah. Yep. And I know that, in our experience of talking with each other, I know that you're pretty particular in what you look for in a good qualified candidate, as you should, right? But how do you, when you're creating your opportunity and putting together, let's say, your job ad, when you think about what's attractive to other top performers, how do you go about putting together that process as you work to create the agency too as well, right? Because as I mentioned, you're up to 8 employees now, and I'm sure that will only continue as you of course, move forward. But when you evaluated your opportunity, how did you go about creating the job ad to make it lucrative and attractive to those top performers that are out there?
So it's evolved a little bit. So when I bought the agency,
Yeah.
it was located kind of west of where I live, and so and the space was not very it wasn't very professional in my mind. Remember, I came from corporate America. I was used to nice corporate space. So I relocated the agency. I moved it into brand new space, brand new paint, carpet, furniture, made it look really nice. In my mind, coming from corporate America, I wanted nice professional space for my clients and my employees. And so I make this investment into space only to realize that people don't come in, right? The folks that come in to pay the bill regularly, and they're usually someone else's agency, I just didn't get a lot of walk-in traffic. So what I hired for in office in the beginning shifted pretty quickly. So about 9 months in, I hired my first remote employee. And the drive behind that for me was I couldn't find the quality of what I was looking for to be able to come in office.
Mm.
I look for experience, especially being remote. So it's shifted quite a bit, and I've hired remote exclusively ever since. I actually shifted gears officially early this year. I applied to Allstate to, change, be a physical location remote
Yeah.
agency at the end of last year, and finally pulled the trigger the beginning of this year. So my entire team is remote. I'm in Pennsylvania. I don't have anybody in Pennsylvania except for me. They're all over Florida, Missouri, New York, Texas, Ohio. I've got folks everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of shifted a bit for me in terms of how I hire. When you place an ad for a remote employee, it gets a lot of visibility, right?
Sure.
Everybody wants to work remotely. And so the roles and responsibilities are key in the ad. And what folks' eyes go to basically is compensation and benefits. And all that stuff is really important. But what I try and do in some of my verbiage is impart the culture of my agency
Yeah.
because it's really important to me. It's really one of the most important things to me is that the folks that I hire fit into my culture. We are all about work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
And I have a really solid team. We'll talk a little bit more moving forward about how I connect with a virtual team.
Yeah.
But making that ad, I want the culture of my agency to jump off that ad. And again, everybody's eyes go to compensation and benefits. I'm a big believer. I provide health benefits, just starting my 401k. I want to be a good steward, a good, manager of a company for employees. So I have all those benefits, but again, culture is really what I want to jump off the page. I attended the 10th session, which was Jeremy. I told you that, like, how dare you make me follow Jeremy Olson?
Yeah.
And one of the things that came out of that session for me is looking for applicants referencing something from my ad. That means they paid attention. So that's a nugget I stole from Jeremy. Like I pay
Mm,
attention to that now.
yeah.
But I run ads pretty consistently. I've played with a couple versions. I have one that I really stick to now because it gets the traction that I'm looking for.
Makes total sense. And I think culture is super important, right? Especially in that virtual setting, because it's a little bit different. But I do want to talk, I know you mentioned it a little bit later about how, of course, you communicate and assist and, how that works in a virtual agency that you've built. But when you were originally making that transition, I think that, it's fair to say that remote has probably become one of the largest topics in hiring since, of course, the pandemic. And, some are still struggling, right? Maybe they hired a remote employee in the past and it didn't work out for whatever reason, right? And then they're hesitant to do it again. Maybe some people have never taken the leap because they have heard about the potential disasters that can take place, right? So for you, making that leap, I mean, what did you do to prepare yourself for that, right? Because working in corporate America, you mentioned that it was all housed within an office, nice
Yeah.
offices, everybody was, shaking hands and seeing each other. Now it's totally different for you. So how did you go about that? What systems did you put in place and processes did you put together for you to be able to feel confident in making that transition?
That's such a great question. And I have to give you a little back history as to
Yeah,
my foundation of a virtual agency.
sure.
When I was working for Merrill Lynch, that's the last role I had before I took the leap into agency ownership. I was a market executive here in Philadelphia, which is where I live. I had 5 offices, 200 people, and COVID hit. And so, to your point, every day I was in a different location interfacing with folks face to face.
Mhm.
And that feeds something for me, both professionally and socially. Like
Yeah.
I get a lot from that. And so when COVID hit, and I got the call from management that said, okay, Suzanne, you got to get all 200 people home in a matter of days. Like we had to get these folks working from home. Um, it was crazy. And so, getting everybody connectivity and how are we going to do this? Okay, we're going to use WebEx and blah, 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 blah. Like it was absolutely nuts. And so here I sit at home and managing my team, and I hated it. I hated working from home. I was used to being in front of people all day, every day, and that food that I was getting, it was feeding me, I just wasn't getting anymore.
Yeah.
So I connected everything virtually, like face to face. Like I didn't have teleconferences, conference calls.
Okay.
I had WebEx meetings. I made sure everything was in person. I hired motivational speakers that were, that we would do via WebEx. When
Mm.
I had to have a conversation with someone, it was over WebEx. It wasn't on the phone. So I would do happy hours over WebEx. Like I tried everything that I could to maintain the culture that I had with the
Yeah.
team that I had. And so it's funny because COVID hits and got to get everybody home. Like, okay, I could do this for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
we never went back, right? It's
Yeah.
crazy. So that for me was a great springboard. When I was struggling to find the quality of what I was looking for in my office and hired my first remote employee, I had already had experience managing a remote team, and that helped. So I use Zoom. Again, we do everything looking at each other, eyeball. I have Zoom and Zoom chat. I have chats for the team. I have chats for everybody individually. I have chats for my leadership team. If somebody's asking a question and I want to pull them into a Zoom, I hit click. We're together as a team at least once a day. At
Mm.
least once a day. I meet with my leadership once a day. I meet with my entire team once a day. My coaching sessions that I do with my team, they get two a week, either from me or from my team. Everything is over Zoom. I also have transparency in their performance, right? So I keep track of what they're doing every day. And both
Mm.
the sales team and the service team have what we call daily success metrics. And they have to meet those metrics every day. And it's for the sales time, it's not rocket science, it's what everybody does. It's sales, quotes, talk time, and dials. And I
Mhm.
have the infrastructure in place to be able to track that. I use Ricochet for my dialing system, lead management system for my sales team, so I can see it all. And I track the service team through Ring Central, through AAV.
Yeah.
So I think, having had the experience of managing remote and that you can create the connectivity. My team is so connected they literally have and I didn't create it, they have a text chat that they, they talk about what they're doing on the weekends, and they're sending pictures of their family, and they really, really enjoy working together. And so much, even more than I could have ever imagined. So I'm actually flying them into Florida on Friday. So I have 3 people in Florida, 2 that were there for Thanksgiving for family visits that we extended their visits, and the rest I'm flying in. We're actually getting together face to face for the first time. And it will be the best money I spend. So we're having dinner Friday night, indoor skydiving on Saturday.
Oh, man.
They actually get to be together in person, but they work very well virtually because we have the infrastructure for it.
Sure. Yeah. You'll have to send me pictures of the indoor skydiving. I'm very intrigued to see.
Yeah, not of me, of everybody else.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I think that's great, right? It seems as if you had the plan, you put it together, and then you made the leap, right? And trusted in the plan and the process that you put together. And I'm sure you've tweaked it along the way, right?
Absolutely.
And have gotten to the point, where you have a really great team that really enjoys working together and got to a good point. And I do want to remind the audience, if you guys do have questions for Suzanne, we do take live audience questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask those. And we'll make sure that we try to fit them in throughout the next 20 to 25 minutes. But I want to backtrack a little bit, Suzanne. So you have applicants coming in, you've created that attractive offering, you're now offering a remote position, and it's a new version of interviewing and hiring, right? Seems you had experience in it a little bit before, but for the Ideal Traits assessment, that's I'm imagining is a part of the process. Is it in the immediate part of the process? And then do you have any specific personalities that you look for that you've identified as a good fit for the positions that you've hired for? And we'll,
I am a big believer in assessments. I've done a ton over my career, right? All the DISC assessments, etc. So when I found Ideal Traits early in my tenure, I subscribed immediately because I'm a big believer in assessments, and I love your platform, I have to tell you. And I find your personalities, the assessments, spot on. I started with, I did it myself, right? Spot on. And then I made everybody in my personal life do it. My husband, my children, my sister, my mother. Like, I find the assessment really spot on. And so I, started with just using your assessment, right? And I would source my own candidates and enter them manually and go through that process. From there, I started running my Indeed ads once I figured out I could do that through you guys, running my Indeed ads, sponsoring them through you guys. And then I would screen through those resumes, right? So, which is an extremely time consuming process. But I would, my feet up at night watching CNBC like I always do, or Sunday, watching football. I'm screening through resumes. And then I have email templates that I would cut and paste, customize a little bit, getting folks to complete the assessment because, not everybody completes it right away.
Yep.
Now I've kind of graduated to that I pay you guys to screen my applicants, the people that apply, and it's worth every penny. It's such a time saver for me. So Faith on your team, who's amazing, gets your team to comb through. We've got tags that they use. They screen the resumes. They put tags so I can see at a glance, are they licensed? What firm do they have experience with? And then they're the ones that encourage folks to complete the assessment and do the 3-question video interview. Can't tell you how many times I've looked at an applicant on paper, looks great. And then I look at that 3-question interview and I'm like, absolutely not. There's no energy here. So it's such a huge time saver for me. So that's my process today. And I appreciate Faith and all of what her team does to save time.
Yeah. We had Lita Hankins on, who was a participant in the virtual hiring assistant program as well. And she was shouting out Shane quite a bit, but it looks like Faith is going to get the shout outs for this one. So Faith, if you're with us, which I'm sure you
Faith.
are. Yeah, you get a little bit of shout out. And for anybody who wants to check out the virtual hiring assistant program, I just put a link to it in the question and answer section. So feel free to take a look at that. But to put it in perspective, Suzanne, for right now, it's fair to say that generally on an ad that you post with the remote, it's generally around 200 to 300 applications. Is that fair?
It's nuts. So and I recruit fairly regularly. I will start and stop an ad because you can pause it at any point. The thing that I've determined that if someone's looking for a job, they're looking for a job, right? And so time sensitivity. And so even though Faith and her team are doing their thing behind the scenes, I'll also go in. And if I see a resume or, tags that make me look at that resume, and they have not completed the assessment, I still send some emails myself. Sometimes that personal, and I do have templates. I literally cut and paste, but I'll also customize. If someone has military service, I thank them for their service. So I personalize it a little bit. I just lost my train of thought. What did you just ask me?
No, I think we were just talking about the amount of applications you receive, and
applicants, yes,
200, 300, and
a ton.
It's that you just didn't have time to do it yourself, right? So then, that's where Faith, of course, and the team come in to help out, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about towards the end. But a question
and it doesn't preclude me from looking myself, right? It streamlines what I'm looking at. So huge time saver.
Yep. Perfect. And we did have an audience question come in that probably has questions over a paid advertisement, so your sponsorship, or do you just post them organically? I know that you've talked about, with me about sponsorship before. I don't know if it's something that you continually do, obviously, since you recruit regularly, as you mentioned. But if you want to talk a little bit about sponsorship and how you have divvied that up, I think that would be a good segue as well.
I don't run an ad without sponsoring it. You just don't get the visibility. And so you don't have to spend a ton of money. I can put a very small budget on Indeed. I have a gal that I work with from Indeed. She gives me some great tips. She's actually helped me with some of the ad verbiage, things that get attention. And I'll throw a $50 or $100 budget and get a ton of applicants. What I was starting to say before I lost my train of thought, when someone's looking for a job, they're looking for a job, right? So I make sure I post ads when I know I'm going to have the time that I need to spend. Even though Faith and her team are saving me tons of time, I have to be committed to combing through this stuff and then actually scheduling interviews. So when I know I'm not going to have time, I'm going to be out next week, I pause that ad and I'll, just restart it when the time is right for me. But I run ads pretty consistently and I never not sponsor them.
Yeah. And I mean, $50 to $100 is very affordable, right? To be able to get in front of applications. And that's the difference for remote. So if you're in the audience and you're considering sponsoring based off what you're hearing here, reach out to us. Our team is very good about being able to help you get that set up. And then once you create an Indeed account, you do get a dedicated account representative too as well, that Suzanne had just mentioned, that will be able to help you with the process in addition to that. And then Indeed did do a program for those of you that have never created an Indeed account before, where if you're creating it for the first time through IdealTraits, you'll get a $100 credit that can be used towards sponsorship. So it's a new program that they launched and it's available through IdealTraits. So if you're on the fence or thinking about it or want to try it out, if you've never had an Indeed account before, you'll get that credit that they do for creating an account. So a really cool thing, and appreciate you for mentioning that. Suzanne, hopefully it answers your question, David. And then John had a question too as well. He just asked what CRM you use. I think that might have been something that you mentioned, but worth repeating.
Yes, I use Ricochet. I know at Allstate, lead manager is our CRM, coming from corporate America and using Salesforce, like lead manager to me was like a glorified spreadsheet. And I'm an administrative idiot. Like I'm slow. I couldn't get it. And so I love Ricochet because it uses algorithms to determine what folks, it's a dialer, right? But it uses algorithms to determine what they should dial. And then literally, speed to lead. I buy a lot of internet leads, and so they get pushed immediately. So I also, in addition to my team, I have a telemarketer, an overseas telemarketer. He's been with me for 15 months. Same individual. I'm about to add a second, who's also in Ricochet. So I can see the activity. He transfers calls right through Ricochet. I just find that a much easier process. I know a lot of folks have a ton of success with lead manager. It was a brain block for me. I just couldn't get it.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Well, Ricochet there for you, John. If you have any questions about that, feel free to come back to us. But David had another question for you here, Suzanne. He wants to know, of the staff that you have, how were you able to find the leaders/managers amongst them? Was there anything specific that you did? I'm not sure if it was an outside hire or maybe you promoted someone from within. Or maybe you don't have that infrastructure right now, but if you wanted to speak a little bit towards that, I think that would be.
Yes. So I have 5 sales, 3 service. One of those service folks she's a player coach. So she gets involved in service when need be, but she's my agency manager.
Yeah.
And I hired her knowing that she was promotable. Like she had managerial background at the time that I hired her. I wasn't ready for an agency manager, nor did I want to hire that from the jump. I wanted someone to grow from within.
Hmm.
And so she has kind of overarching support for risk management. She gets involved. She's great, amazing with the service team. She also gets involved with the sales team. She's just a fantastic employee.
Yeah.
One of my sales folks is also a player coach. So she sells, but she's also a sales coach. We have a particular talk path that we follow here, and I'm a stickler for it.
Mm.
And it's, listen, I've been managing salespeople for more decades than I care to admit. And, it's the psychology of selling. And so we focus around that psychology, both in how we get people to stay on the phone with us, and then in terms of what we present and then closing, you have to follow the talk path.
Yeah.
And so my player coach, my sales coach sells, so she knows what it's like in the game, but she's also coaching the sales team around the talk path. And she was also hired into sales and promoted as a sales manager. So I didn't hire from the outside into those roles. That's my preference, to bring them on board first. Let me see how we're operating in the player role, and
Mhm.
then promote to coach.
Yeah. And I think that's important too, because a lot of the existing staff at a lot of businesses, right, insurance or not, right, you have really good staff that has that ambition to work their way up when presented with the right opportunity. And it's a really good tool to keep people in a seat, right, to retain those good qualified people. And I'm sure that it's gone a long way in retaining those two people that you mentioned that, have those ambitions to not only sell or service themselves, but then also to help others, reach their goals and train them to become better sales or service people. So
Well,
yeah,
they both have, had aspirations in the door. They continue to have bigger aspirations, which is amazing for me,
yep,
because at some point that agency manager is not going to be involved in service at all, right? I'm in growth mode. I want to continue to grow. I think there's a great opportunity in this business, particularly in the structure that I'm in with Allstate.
yeah,
And same for the player coach. At some point, she's going to come out of sales and coach the team full time when we get to that point. Maybe in 2025, we'll see. But
yeah.
so they have a career path. They have a career path here.
Outstanding. Perfect. Well, we've gone through the creation of the job ad, the assessments, and then of course mentioned, how Faith and the virtual hiring assistant team are texting and calling and emailing the candidates to get them to complete the assessment, and then texting, calling, and emailing them to get them to complete the video interview. And then they get turned over to you, right? You get the ones to look through. So throughout Success Spotlight, the 10 that we've done, I mention this every time, that we've heard some very unique things that take place, right? Jason Kilgo creates a PDF version of a bike company that's non-existent that he gives to them and wants them to role play a scenario of them selling a bike. Drew Hodgson takes them out to dinner to see how they, operate in the dinner. And then, of course, we heard last week with Jeremy, he has them send an email about why they would be an asset to the agency and why they want to work there, right? So throughout your interview process, with it being virtual, it's, I'm sure, a little bit different than most people can do, right? Because you can't take someone in Texas out to dinner. I think it would be a little bit more expensive for you to do that, but if you want to do it, I guess you could. But what do you have unique that's a part of your process in terms of interviewing once the candidates come to you, Suzanne? Or, do you just keep it status quo? How does it work for you?
So my interview process is me first. That first interview is usually 45 minutes to an hour. So by
Okay.
the time they get to me, they're pretty well screened, and I'm going to
Mhm.
dedicate that 45 minutes to an hour. And I ask them to do the same. If
Yeah.
they're not in a position to give me that dedicated time, then I'm happy to do interviews after hours or on the weekends, because I want them sitting focused, spending focused time with me.
Yeah.
I open with, where they're living, where are they from? Right.
Yeah.
And so that personal piece is really important to me. Let me get to know you personally first. Tell me your story. One of the first questions I ask is, what's the first thing you ever did for money? I was a paper girl. Like, I
Mhm.
delivered newspapers before they were delivered by vehicle. That's how far back I go. It was
Yeah.
an afternoon paper, and the papers weighed more than I did, but I
Yeah.
was 12 years old. And so you kind of get a flavor for, what someone's path has been in
Yes.
terms of drive, right? So I
Yeah.
spend time getting to know them, and then hear all about their circumstance. I separate sales and service. I have a separate service team, sales team. I wrestle with inside sales. I may do it. I haven't ruled it out, but I think there's inherently someone's natural lane. And that's one of the reasons why I love IdealTraits assessment so much. Like, it tells me what someone's natural lane is. And I go through that assessment. I share that assessment with them. I send it to them so they can see it. And I talk about their natural lane. And I think people are happiest in their natural lane. I try and hire to the natural lane. So first interview, get to know them, spend a good amount of time. I'm only looking for experienced. And so I do make them role play with me. I give them a scenario, and it's just initially not even selling me, just keeping me on the phone. Because what we're doing is outbound dialing and getting folks on the phone. You got to keep them on the phone. So I have them role play that first, and then I role play it for them. This is what we sound like, and then make them do it again.
Yeah.
I want to see if they heard anything that I said, right? Because chances are very few folks will role play it in a way. I'm not listening. I don't hear what I'm exactly looking for out of the gate. Very few folks follow my specific talk path. The second interview is a joint interview with that agency manager and that sales coach. And those gals are harder than I am. So that person has to pass muster with those individuals. And they also role play. They also then share with them our scripting. And then that third interview with me, they need to be prepared to role play our script. And so if they pass muster there, then offers are made. But I involve my team because they are actively involved in managing that individual. And we've had some circumstances. We're an all-gal leadership team. It's myself and my two gals. And there have been circumstances where folks are not going to be comfortable working for three women. It's better for us to find that out up front. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's great to involve the team, right? Because they really are the heartbeat of the culture that you have talked so greatly about how important it is, right? And it's hard to just have one person representing that. You sort of have to have multiple people involved there to really give a good indication of what the culture as a whole looks like. So I think that's a awesome thing to do.
It also gives the applicant an opportunity to ask about me.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
And they listen, my gals are brutally honest. And oftentimes applicants will ask things of them that they may not necessarily ask of me.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. All right. And then let's fast forward. So you got a candidate who makes it through, your interview, and then the more difficult interview that you mentioned with your team, right? And then you extend the offer and they start. So you talked about how you built out the expectation. And I do want to talk a little bit more about that. I know you mentioned you use Zoom to really keep everyone together and do those regular meetings to still make people feel as if they're a part of a team. But you did mention something about expectation. And I've heard it a couple of times throughout, the last 35 minutes about, hey, you have a per day expectation. So I would love if you could put some numbers to that. Like, how many calls are you expecting from your people? How much call time are you expecting? Do you have other KPIs that you monitor? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that too. It's like, what should be the expectation for a remote employee or just an employee in general? Because monitoring software may be new to some folks,
So our daily success metrics for sales, it starts with sales, right? They need to do at least 4 items a day, quote, 5 households a day, have 3+ hours talk time, or 150 dials. I am less focused on the dials. I really want them spending their time in the top 2 buckets, right? The highest and best use of their time is selling and quoting. And so I try and create an environment where that's where they're spending most of their time. So I have a full-time telemarketer. I'm literally about to add a second one. That full-time telemarketer calls my leads in Ricochet, just like my sales team does, and transfers anywhere from 8 to 12 a day. I also use external vendors' live transfers. So I have a fair amount of live transfers coming in. My service team is also really good at identifying opportunities for the sales team. So my service team doesn't sell at all. They're all licensed, but they don't do selling. Their natural lane is service. They're nurturers. They're perfectionists. They're not salespeople. They're good at identifying, but I want those opportunities in the hands of the sales team. So that daily success metric, first thing in the morning, that comes out. Did you get a green check mark? Did you meet that criteria yesterday? If you didn't, you're having a conversation with one of the three of us. What happened yesterday? I had trouble with ASC. We got the new auto products, so there's some of that. They got sidetracked by something happened, technology issues, whatever, but there's a expectation. If you didn't meet the daily success metric yesterday, you're having a conversation today. And we review that as a team every day. But again, my focus is on selling and quoting. I could care less if you made 3 dials yesterday, if you sold 3 households. I don't care about your dials. Again, highest and best use of their time is quoting and selling. Now, if my telemarketer is having a tough time, or we're not getting a lot of transfers, then you better have the dials to get to the level of quoting that you need to. But I focus really on the top 2 metrics first. If it's necessary to focus on talk time and dials, I will. But again, I have a pretty seasoned team. They're well coached, well trained, and the highest and best use of their time is quoting and selling.
Totally agree.
Service team also has metrics. They have metrics around referrals they make every day. They're proactive, not just in finding service opportunities, but they call win-backs. They ask for client referrals. Like, they're really good about finding stuff for the sales team, and they have their own daily success metric every day.
Yeah. I mean, I love you mentioned the telemarketer, 8 to 12 Passovers a day.
He's good.
That's
well, great. Let me tell you, he's been with me 15 months. Like, the thing about using Ricochet as a dialer is he's in my dialer. I can hear him. And so my sales coach also has a responsibility for the telemarketer.
Sure.
And so, and this drives her crazy. I tell her, if we're doing everything we're supposed to, we're missing 10% of his calls. That means everybody's on the phone. Everybody's on the phone. They're busy. And that's okay. It's not like a live lead that I paid $100 for, right? This is my internal telemarketer.
Sure.
But because we've had the opportunity to treat him as our direct employee and coach him, he's gotten really, really good. He's really good.
Awesome. And I'm sure once you hire the next telemarketer, he'll be influential in training the new telemarketer, right?
Yeah, it's his cousin. So hopefully the genes will work for us.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. And then we did get a question here from Monique. Monique, good to hear from you. I hope all is well. Monique wants to know, what's your budget, if you're willing to share it, for leads and live transfers. I know you mentioned that that's a part of your process too as well. So if you're willing to share a budget, maybe it varies, maybe it doesn't, but if you want to shed some light.
I spend anywhere between $2,500 and $3,000 per salesperson a month.
Yep. And that
and I track my cost per sale by lead source, right? Like, paying $5 for a lead, but it takes you 100 of them to get a sale. That's a $500 cost per sale. If I buy 8 at $20 and I have the same sale, like, I focus on not so much lead price, which is a big departure from when I opened my doors and didn't know any better. Oh, I want the cheapest leads. Like, and the lead game is a game. I always say the lead game is a game I'm determined to win. I don't know if I'm gonna, but I'm gonna try. But I have right now 4 different vendors. I will always have a minimum of 4. I spend a ton, so I spread it around, and I pay attention. When one lead source starts to wane, I cut it off, and I may double down on something else. I'm big on multipliers of where I think our sweet spots are. So I put multipliers on some of my bids for some criteria, multi-cars, married, that sort of thing. But yeah, I spend a fair amount per employee a month.
Yeah, great. And I think it's good to, invest into those folks, especially if they've proven their ability to sell, right? Investing into them. And I'm sure that, $2,500 to $3,000 that you invest, obviously it's a return for you, or you probably wouldn't do it, right? Based off of how close you pay attention to the data, which I think is a good reminder for everybody to make sure that you're looking at that. But
the sales team knows that. And so I tell them what I tell my children: to whom much is given, much is expected. To whom much is given, much is expected. So when I have this lead spend and I'm investing in you and I'm about to hire another telemarketer, like, there's an expectation that you follow my talk path. If you don't follow my talk path, you waste my lead. And so they know what they have. They know what they have.
Perfect. All right. So you get invested into them. And then of course I talked a little bit about retaining good employees, and I think that that promotion from within is a great tool to do it that you've done. But then in addition to that, there's other factors, right? Like there could be, you mentioned the trip that you guys are going on in Florida, but what are you doing in terms of support, right? Because that's where, as an agency owner, a lot of the time can be lost, right? Because you got all of these different things going on and you have 8 staff members, and it's hard to really provide them all with support and training that they need. Of course, the sales coach that you have and the individual that's helping in the support assist, but are there any training programs that you do outside of your agency, or is all of the training in-house?
Yeah, I subscribe to all of them. I do. I believe, you can never spend too much time helping folks enhance their skill.
Sure.
And it's an investment in them. I love Jeremy Olson, RPOA. Love, love, love Jeremy Olson. He's so kind, gracious, and generous with his knowledge. He and Kristen are amazing. I also subscribe to Craig Wiggins, and I've also used Vlad Shurchenko, the insurance sales lab. My script was born from his. Love, love, love. He understands the psychology of selling too. So there's no need to recreate the wheel. There's a ton of resources, and at least once a week, I charge my team with attending some sort of session. Usually my agency manager will look at that at the beginning of the week and assign it to the teams based upon where we think the needs are, that they attend some sort of training session. The other thing that I think is really important in terms of, providing staff, they're here to make a living, right? This is not volunteer. They're here for the money, but it's not just about the money. It's about recognition and appreciation and a work-life balance. I was raised by a single mother. I know what it's like when mom has to go to work and a kid is sick and how stressful that could be. Like I just had a gal, one of my service gals, took a couple days off, long weekend, went to see her family in another state, came back and they have the flu. Her son has the flu. Oh, well, okay, take the day and take care of your kid. She will, because I allow for that. People are so dedicated. I don't even have to tell them to work extra if they need to. They'll do it. So I'm a big believer in a work-life balance, and that stuff happens personally, and you have to give people grace.
Yeah, perfect. And I mean, I saw something the other day where it's like if you have someone at work, like they have a situation like that, right, where their child is sick and they're asking for a day off and you decline it. It's like, is the work that they're going to do that day going to be worth them not being at home with their sick child, right? So it's like something to consider when going through it. But we do have an audience question here that we'll I suppose start to wrap up with here, Suzanne. But Tony is asking, what happens if you are not using third-party leads but have a remote LSP that has different campaigns downloaded to Lead Manager? Are you still expecting 4 items per day, 5 quotes? Or is this based on having the support staff or third-party marketing, such as warm transfers?
That all goes to my sales team. So just about everything comes through Ricochet. Any marketing I do is my Allstate sanctioned phone system, AAV, which is Ring Central. So I do mailers. We will get some calls into the agency through Ring Central. You can identify sales and service lines. So I use the sales line, so the sales team knows to pick up that line too. But I don't, my sales team does not use Lead Manager. If I want a campaign, and I did this for ASC, right? Affordable, Simple, Connected. We got the new auto product October 15th. I wanted my team to quote at a really high level for the first few days, and not 5 households, 10, right? And I focused on requotes. So I pulled that out of Lead Manager. I did pull it out and I campaigned it in Ricochet, but we do everything out of Ricochet.
Everything out of Ricochet. Makes total sense. All right. Awesome. Well, Suzanne, I really appreciate it. I think all the information that you've shared has been super impactful, right? And again, a common trend that we have is that it's not anything that will take months to implement, right? Like these are things that can begin implementing next day or in the next couple of days, right? Depending on what you're looking at. But the same question that I ask every guest at the end is, as a seasoned professional with hiring and firing and managing, right? But from the insurance perspective, what's your number one recommendation for any agent out there that is looking to improve their hiring or maybe get started with their hiring, what's the one thing that you would mention that they need to start doing today?
You have to be consistent.
Hmm.
You have to be consistent. Now think about your sales team. If they're not quoting and selling regularly, they get rusty. Same with you for interviewing, right? You have to be consistent and don't wait until you're desperate to hire someone to focus on recruiting. I always, always, always am running an ad. I might turn it off and on, and I still have people I drip on. Like that comes from my recruiting financial advisors, right? Because oftentimes I was recruiting someone from another firm. It may be a year before I actually get them. So I have a pipeline of people that I've spoken to in my 3 years that may have elected to stay put or have gone somewhere else or are service. So when I need that next service person, that's the pipeline I'm going to first. Like you got to be consistent and don't wait till you're desperate to hire somebody.
It's really good. And we've heard that a couple of times, right? We heard Drew Hodgson say hire from a position of strength. We heard Brian Scott say always be recruiting. And now we have Suzanne Dwyer telling everyone to be consistent when it comes to your hiring and don't get rusty, right? Because that's the last thing you want to happen. But Suzanne, again, we talked about a lot of great stuff here. You know, the need to the transition to remote for you and what the systems and processes and expectations that you put into place and how you hold people accountable to that. But then also understanding that it can be fun sometimes and that it's important to have fun in that work hard, play hard mentality. So
yeah, my mother broke her ankle. I had to stay with her for a few days. So I was working from her living room table and so I came in one day and she said, "Oh my God, you laugh a lot at work." You laugh a lot. Yes, for sure. We have fun.
Yeah. Outstanding. Well, Suzanne, I appreciate it again for joining. And again, to all of you that took the time out of your day to join us here and to listen live and to some of you for asking questions. If you did want to reach out and discuss the virtual hiring assistant program and have Faith or Shane assist you with your hiring process, give us a call or send us an email and mention Success Spotlight, and we'll give you $100 off that monthly subscription to help you get started. So feel free to reach out to us if you need some assistance there. But Suzanne, thank you again. I know how busy you are. I know that you have a vacation coming up, so I think that's kind of crunches the work that you have to do. Yeah, it's been a great pleasure getting to know you over the years, and I know that everyone that attended and will watch the recording will benefit from the session today. So I can't thank you enough, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon. But thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Nolan.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next month for Success Spotlight number 12. See ya.
See ya.